Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today I am joined by my friends, colleagues, Nightlight alumni to break down the astrology of the month of November for you. There are quite a few transits that we're going to be taking a look at today that span the month of November. We've got that Grand Water Trine reactivated several times, a very powerful new moon that we're also looking at in our horoscopes this week. So we're going to break it all down for you here today. Before we get into it, as always, remember to like and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you get updates for everything that we're doing when all the new episodes drop. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. If you're listening to this today, there's also a separate live stream that's happening today where we're taking a look at the Grand Water Trine and taking some Q&A, maybe looking at some charts. So kind of a fun day here at Nightlight. You get a monthly overview, plus you have a live stream taking place today on the channel. And if you missed the live stream, you can just click on the live link and you'll see the replay of it. But anyway, yeah, a big week here. And so we're excited to be breaking it down for you today. When you go over to the website, we are running a few promotions. The main thing is that right now, if you go to the courses page, click on first year course. We are in the last weeks of enrollment for our next section of our first year program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. The start date has been pushed back a week to November 15th. That also means that you have until this Friday to save on the early bird rate. At the end of today's video, there's an informational section that I've tagged on that tells you everything you need to know about the course. It's a one-year immersion into ancient Hellenistic astrology. You're really getting at the roots, technically and philosophically, of this ancient astrological tradition. Everything we do at Nightlight has the idea of building meaningful bridges between traditional classical forms of astrology and modern psychological forms. So you really get the best of both worlds in our program. At the bottom, you will find the early bird enrollment options, which are available until the 31st. That's just the end of this week. But there's also tuition assistance. So if you are someone who could use a little bit of help, click on the tuition assistance button, apply now, tell us your situation. You can pick within a sliding scale a price that works for your budget. We want to make sure that people are not priced out of studying astrology. We feel that a sacred topic should be accessible for everyone. And so that's a big part of our vision at Nightlight. Every day I've been saying something about why I think it's worth studying with us at Nightlight. Today I'll just say this: the people that you're seeing on this channel are a part of our mission to not just pack out our classes, but to empower the next generation of talented and successful astrologers. I look back on the good fortune that I had at different stages of people who helped me with my career. And we want Nightlight to be that, where you can see new people and new faces, that people are getting opportunities to read, people are getting opportunities to teach, people are getting opportunities to create content. So if you want to come and study in a program that will really have your back when it comes to trying to provide meaningful opportunities for professional growth, that I think is one of the high points of our program. So on that note, I am very excited to be taking a look at the astrology of November with the crew: Shirzad, Courtney, Tim, Bianca. Welcome back, guys.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, it's good to be back. It's good to be kind of moving officially. I feel like we can officially say that we're out of eclipse season now that we've had a new official new moon out of eclipse season, and we're kind of coming into a different phase of the astrology in November. There are a number of different sections that we have in this month, and we're going to be breaking them down one at a time, with each of our hosts taking you through a different segment of the month's astrology. There are a number of segments that we've sort of broken up creatively and assigned, and that's what we've been doing every month. And it's been really fun to hear each of these unique astrologers breaking things down. And so I'm really excited to continue that. Some of the highlights of this month, you'll see when we go through the transits ahead and each of these hosts breaks things down for you, you're going to see that there are some timestamps. Inevitably, someone's face will get blotted out by one of the banners. But as we go through the month, some of the big highlights for this month are there's really a number of oppositions that are happening to Uranus that are taking place. We have a Mars opposition to Uranus. We have a Mercury opposition to Uranus, a Venus opposition to Uranus. So a very Uranian month, in also a month that features several activations of the Grand Water Trine, including a very powerful new moon in Scorpio that features Mercury being at the heart of the sun, or Cazimi, at the time of the new moon, while also opposite Uranus. So November, like most astrologers, probably had several other months marked on their calendar at the start of 2025 for, biggest headlines of the astrological year. But November is sneaky in that there are so many major activations of water taking place amidst a bunch of oppositions to Uranus. So I think it has the potential to be an emotionally evocative month, a month that shifts us personally, and especially on the level of body, mind, emotion, instinct. When you see so much water present, you think to yourself that we're living beings who have real emotional connections and responses to our environments, to other people. And there's a lot of reinforcement of positive connections, and maybe the eliminating or shifting of dynamics that aren't as positive or supportive emotionally. We can really see that at the outset of this month. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I am going to hand over the hosting now to our wonderful group. And let me just get things set up on my end so that I make sure you can all see this okay. All right. So to start off the month, Bianca is going to take us through an opening sequence in November, and I will highlight that sequence on the screen for you here. If I can just, let me make sure I get this up on. Okay. Can you guys see it? Okay, fantastic. Yep. Let me do one more thing here so that I can, there we go. Okay. Perfect. So Bianca is going to take us through this opening sequence. Let me outline it for you quickly so that you can see it in overview before she takes it one at a time. At the very beginning of the month on November 2nd, Venus is going through a square to Jupiter. Always nice to see the benefics connecting. We go forward just a few days and to the 4th, and we're going to see Mars moving through this opposition to Uranus as soon as Mars crosses into Sagittarius. Very powerful transit there, followed by a new moon coming through in Taurus on November 5th. I'll just circle that right here. So that new moon in Taurus is an exalted moon in Venus's sign, as Venus is also culminating in Libra, kind of a powerful Venusian moment there at the beginning of the month. And then we have further evidence that Venus is in the center of things, with Venus moving into Scorpio and immediately squaring Pluto by about November 7th. So this is the opening sequence of the month that Bianca is going to cover for us. And on that note, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So I thought it was really cool that we start off with such a nice transit, such as the benefics coming together, even if it is in a square. I was doing a bit of reading the other night, and I came across 4th century Astrology of Firmicus Maternus, and I was reading through what he had to say in my thesis around the square Jupiter to Venus, and he doesn't describe this as a harsh or destructive square like what we may think, but more of like a creative tension that produces charm, popularity, and like a warm devotion to life. So in book 6, I just got a snippet, and he says, just to paraphrase, this conjunction associates one in friendships of many people, so there's that popularity piece, conveys actions and profits through the protection of women, so that's that success, opportunity, and material benefit comes through that of through women or feminine influences. And then he says, and makes one preserve the religions of the gods with the devoted heat of reverence. So I was like, oh, what could that possibly mean? So I thought, with that phrase, preserving the religions of the gods, speaking to that Jupiterian piece, but also if we took away the religious layer of it, just in a modern universal sense, it speaks to me as like a natural reverence for life itself. So this could be a time where we treat love and beauty and human connection as sacred, and it's not dogmatic. It's like a felt devotion to goodness and grace and all things sacred in all things. And then that last piece, when he says with the devoted heat of reverence, I was like, that's such an interesting way of putting it, but in my mind that speaks to this time where faith and philosophy is embodied. It's like we are living our values passionately and inspired reverence in others through our sincerity and generosity of spirit. So all in all, I think this is going to be a great way to open the month, and there's going to be, we could see prosperity through feminine connections and embodied reverence, which leads me into that in the next couple of days, on the November the 4th, we hit that once Mars crosses the sign boundary into Sagittarius, immediately it hits that opposition to Uranus and Uranus and Gemini, sorry. And I titled this, it's got a theme to me, and I was thinking how this was the transit of all of them that I had that was really challenging to me, because I was thinking, how can I be creative with this? And not going to speak to what the typical things you might hear about a Mars Uranus opposition or Mars Uranus contact, because it can be quite intense and quite easily. I was thinking this is like the undercover transit of the year, like just sneaking up on us. And so the theme for me that I'm going with is the theme of trusting the body's intelligence as a form of awakening. And sometimes awakening doesn't happen through a sudden flash of insight, but more through like a slow embodied process of learning to trust our bodies again. So Mars in Sag speaks to like a faith that could be physical. It's that courage to act, that courage to move and meet life directly head on. And when Uranus in Gemini opposes this, it's like the body's instinctive intelligence is challenged by the quick electrified pace of the mind. And the result can feel like agitation and overstimulation. Yet in this holds the potential, I believe, for liberation. And I experienced this tension quite deeply after, and I'm going to just share an experience that, so I'll try and keep this short, and it's nothing that I'm uncomfortable sharing with. It's just about childbirth. And I did have for my first baby, it was quite a traumatic birth, and he was in distress and we had to get him out urgently. There was panic. There was just this heightened sense of urgency with delivery of my first. And so during labor, while I was pushing him and bringing him into this life, my tailbone broke. And so the experience of that left me feeling in a lot of pain afterwards, and it was quite traumatic for me. And then shortly after his first birthday, I found out that I was pregnant again. And so because it was so soon after, my body I felt like it hadn't yet quite fully recovered. I had this deep fear of going through that same experience all over again. But I knew that I couldn't approach this with the same resistance or with the same tension and fear as I had before. I needed to trust my body, and if I was going to get through this successfully, I had to somehow reshape my mindset and enter into this with no fear. So throughout that pregnancy, I was able to prepare myself physically, mentally, emotionally. And when the time came, I birthed my baby girl into this world easily and peacefully and calmly. There was no pain. And it was just I had the sense that my body, I trusted my body in knowing that it knew what it needed to do. And so what had once been an experience of rupture became, for me, an experience of redemption in a way. Like, oh, I can trust in my body and it can do amazing things. I don't need to fear this anymore. So this experience helped me understand the body's intelligence, and in its own form of genius, it's very instinctive. And so when we allow ourselves to trust, even after trauma or fear, something opens up and there's a renewal of faith. And as Sagittarius season begins, the sun hasn't yet quite entered into Sag, but it will do later this month. We move from that dark half of the year towards the slow return of the light in terms of the quality of light to darkness in the zodiacal year, in the solar year in the northern hemisphere. And so I think this mirrors the process of reawakening after difficulty. It's like that yang emerging within the yin and trusting the body's wisdom as part of the same pattern, and it's how we come back to ourselves. So just some thoughts, some prompts to get you thinking about this transit, rather than approaching it with fear or with anxiety. More like ask questions like how does this seasonal shift, darkness giving way to the light, mirror a process of rebirth or reawakening in my own life? And what does trusting the body's intelligence mean to me at this stage of my journey? So that's what I have for Uranus and Mars. And then we enter into, on the November the 5th, this exalted full moon in Taurus. It's just what we need at this time, in my opinion. I was just like, oh, this is like the reset button. It's like, okay, let's pause, let's recoup. It's one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most stabilizing and nourishing lunations of the year. And so just off the back of that Mars opposite Uranus transit, where it can create this kind of restless energy, the sudden impulses and racing thoughts, and like heightened sensitivity, the moon, this exalted moon, it gives rise to emotional steadiness rather than volatility. It's like a deep craving for peace and security and sensual nourishment, and the natural alignment between like the body, the heart, and then being grounded because it's such a it's a moon in an earthy sign, and it's exalted. It's like a moment of deep embodiment where the emotional self and the physical self merge in harmony. It's like a sacred pause to reset and digest. And the host is Venus in domicile, although just about to cross the sign boundary out of Libra into Scorpio, which leads me to my final piece on Venus square Pluto, which happens just a couple of days later on November the 7th. So when Venus reaches Scorpio, which is her detriment, it could be that through her own reflection during, say, that full moon just a couple days ago, having recalibrated and reconnected with herself, she comes to some self-realizations or self-beliefs that possibly need shifting. And I liken this time of Venus in Scorpio as something like the last quarter phase of her own cycle with Pluto. And I took Dane Ridgow's description of the last quarter phase, although he is speaking in terms of the moon, the sun and moon cycle. But if I take what he says, he mentions a moment of, he describes this as a moment of crisis and repolarization, the breaking down of idols and images, and a revolution of consciousness. And I think for Venus, those idols and images are the ideals of beauty and harmony and relationship that she's crafted so beautifully in Libra. And when they once brought meaning, but have possibly become too rigid or too polished or too bound to social expectation. So when she enters into Scorpio and enters into that square with Pluto in Aquarius, it's like the perfectly balanced love story collapses. Like the pretty image of what love should look like shatters. So it's like in her crisis, what rises possibly could be this volcanic creative power of like raw feeling. And she becomes revolutionary, exposing performative love or challenging what society worships as desirable. And just a couple of questions to ponder on during this transit could be, where in my relationship do I feel constrained by expectation or polished appearances or social rightness? And how can I allow desire to teach me about power, surrender, and authenticity and love? And so that's what I have for that first week of November.
I love that. Thank you, Bianca. That was a really nice coverage of the opening sequence of the month. And I can't help but notice that, in the course of 5 days, Venus goes through a square to Jupiter and then a square to Pluto. And the way of drawing that together that I really appreciated that you just did was to say, like, look, there's this embodied wisdom. And I think with the Grand Water Trine in the air, talking about the entire month as a month of embodied wisdom, the water is so much about that kind of wisdom. And what kinds of changes does that knowing, like it, you know, one of the things we do for our girls is we say, what does your body feel right now? Because it's just a good habit to be in, to ask yourself how your body's feeling and what is its wisdom telling you. I'm afraid, I'm hungry, I mean, I'm tired, whatever it might be. And how can that form of wisdom lead the way? It's present right in these early transits of the month. So anyway, thank you, Bianca. That was wonderful.
Yeah, no worries. And also one other thing, just real quickly to that, is like, especially with the Mars Uranus opposition, is to, I thought I'd focus on like not to be fearful or afraid of, or heighten feelings of anxiety at this time. Like it could feel electrifying. It could feel, you know, like there's a lot going on, too much mental stimulation, but to not fear that and to listen to your body, which those Grand Water Trines are speaking to us so much here at this time. So yeah.
Your body's wise, your body's strong. You know, your body you can do this. I loved the story of the birthing and the going through the same experience and being able to hold space for yourself and having a different experience because you trusted something capable deep within you. I think that was a really nice story to highlight the sequence as well. Okay, we're going to move on to our next portion of the month. I'm going to outline it for us really briefly here. Tim is going to be covering Mercury turning retrograde on the 9th in Sagittarius within 3 degrees of a conjunction to Mars, which then perfects on the 12th. So we have 2 transits, the stationing and turning retrograde of Mercury in Sagittarius within 3 degrees of Mars, and then the actual conjunction via retrograde to Mars on November 12th. This is a very powerful sequence of events. Mercury's retrogrades are always worth covering, but when Mercury does, anytime Mercury stations and changes directions, and it does so in a close conjunction with another planet, it's as though the retrograde is flavored by the combination of those planets. It becomes a very important place to focus on and analyze as astrologers. So I am going to let Tim tell us about that now.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Adam. Yeah, you're completely right. And Bianca, you guys said something really great, this Grand Water Trine and really feeling our bodies and our emotions. And you mentioned about the anxiety and the fear and some of the things that we're uncovering and discovering. Yeah, with Mercury and Scorpio, like that whole sequence and how we're going to, you know, Mercury's going to retrograde right back over that and come back and through that Grand Water Trine. I think you guys are spot on. So as we know, to start off again, I always like to start with our key significators just to refresh. Mercury, it's the planet of communication, our intellect, it's reasoning. I say that very, very importantly, it's reasoning, because when Mercury goes into Sagittarius, he's in detriment, right? Sagittarius is the knower. He's the seeker of truth, ideology, optimism, ruled by Jupiter, right? Cohesion is a really good Jupiterian term that I like. Versus Mercury's analytical, you know, sometimes things just work. I have faith that they work. Sagittarian is, of course, oh, I know that's the truth, versus Mercury's like, we'll prove it. And Sagittarius, I don't need to do that. So I do want to take us back a little bit before the retrograde, back to the pre-retrograde context, back in like October 23rd. That's when Mercury was conjoined Mars back in Scorpio and was actually at 23 degrees in the Grand Water Trine. And so in that Grand Water Trine, we've got Jupiter in Cancer, right? Exalted. That gives, you know, that energy is like expansion and cohesion of the home, of comfort, of safety, really big. Sometimes Jupiter can get bigger than his britches. And we could say a little bit of nationalism that can be very heavy. That flavor is trining Saturn in Pisces, right? That's the last sign of the zodiac. That's whatever's left here is going to stay. In retrograde, whatever is whatever that we agree upon or that is moving forward from this point on is what stays. Everything else will break down or kind of fall apart. And both of those are looking directly and supporting and trining that 23rd, 24th degree in Scorpio. And it's almost as though these outer planets are witnessing and experiencing what Mercury was doing at that time in Scorpio, who was within 2 degrees of Mars, and Mars is telling Scorpio to dig, uncover, communicate what's going on, what's happening. So it's when Bianca and Adam were talking about the trust your body, the anxiety, the emotion, it's almost as though we were being communicated and actually witnessing these things and having emotions. So Mercury is exposing these things, or maybe the information has come clear. But then by by October 30th, he enters Sagittarius, and the tone starts to change. Right? We go from the Scorpionic deceit, kind of uncovering things, lies, power, to more of the Jupiterian flavor of zeal, of maybe not necessarily religious, but high moral or high truth rhetoric. Some people could say kind of on a soapbox saying, hey, this is how we should move, or injecting religious beliefs as well. Maybe persuasion. Again, with the cohesion of Jupiter, it could be a little word soupy because Mercury doesn't necessarily have all the analytical skills, but he's got a lot of words and tools to make people want to feel this way. So as he's in Sagittarius, kind of changing the way, Mars low-key enters into that Grand Water Trine. While Mercury's spewing out, he's telling people this and that, building up fervor, building up excitement. Could be because, again, Jupiter's in Cancer, that religious kind of fervor going on, but you're witnessing Mars. Everything is witnessing Mars. Mars eventually enters Sagittarius on November 4th, and now there's some action behind that fervor, right? So now we've gone from, we've just witnessed something in our bodies back in Scorpio that is uncovered, that maybe emotionally we don't know how to, have we dealt with that? And going into Sagittarius is that very, have we dealt with that? Have the facts uncovered? Do those match my philosophical beliefs? Do those match the actions or the words that are being said and kind of profligated out on a soapbox? Do those things match? Now, what I think is interesting, and here's where we're going to get to this retrograde, is on November 8th, the day before Mercury goes retrograde, as Mars is about 3 degrees, like 3 degrees of separation from Mercury. So we're just getting into like this engagement. Uranus retrogrades into Taurus. Like, I'm like, yo, that sounds like pretty trigger heavy, considering nowhere else in the chart is there any other grounded earth energy, right? All of everything else we've experiencing is like water. So it's very emotional, it's air, it's intellectual, physically exhausted, probably mentally tired. It's a lot going on. And now you have something shocking of Uranus, the great transformer going into Taurus, which is all of our creature comforts, that's agriculture, our food, our money, literally hitting there. The following day, Mercury goes retrograde. Wouldn't it be interesting? Now, maybe some of those, and now he's getting even closer to Mars. So maybe some of those, the zeal that maybe started out in the beginning of Mercury going direct into Sagittarius, maybe some of those over promises, right? Because Jupiter's expanding everything, or ideologies or really high pedestals of which we held on to people. Maybe we've got to backtrack. That Uranus in Taurus, maybe that's a trigger of a physical event or something that occurs that maybe has someone walking something back. Now, the interesting thing is the words and the fervor, although you're walking something back, they're moving closer to Mars. So it's moving into a conjunction, a full-on conjunction by November 12th with Mars. So Mars is still moving direct. So that aggression and that the amount of fire behind what is being said or the beliefs that are being pushed are still really pushing, even though there may be some reflections about what was said or the validity of what was said. Because Mercury is going to cross over that Mars and still go back to that, eventually go back to that Scorpio point, to almost again have to, in that Grand Water Trine, reassess. Does this move? Does this feel good to us? Is this a sense of nationalism and protection? Does this move forward into our future? That's something that we're going to probably have to continue to reassess. But as Mercury gets closer to Mars, that combativeness becomes even more. Maybe the rhetoric could get even more heightened. But with Mercury retrograde, maybe it doesn't even make sense. Maybe there's an abandonment of so to speak, logic. Maybe there's more of more kind of word soup kind of flavor going on. Also, though, on November 12th, as Mercury is retrograding and is conjunct Mars, Jupiter also goes retrograde, which is very interesting. The ruler of Sagittarius is now retrograde as well. So could it be a very deep reflective tone here? Or maybe could it be that Jupiter needs to take another look at what exactly is brings us comfort? Are the expansions and boundaries from Jupiter and Saturn, are these the right boundaries? Do we have enough porousness between to support whatever direction, the new direction that Saturn is eventually going to go into Aries and take us? Do we have enough of that? And so I think it's very interesting that Jupiter's going retrograde while Mercury is retrograde, and Mars continues to push this agenda through. So all in all, some really interesting things to keep watch for over this period of time is re-examining maybe spiritual or your philosophical frameworks that maybe don't really work with the lived experience. So maybe you thought something completely lived away, or it should be this way, but it's not working out that way. Even revisiting to some like those buried truths in Scorpio, maybe you uncovered something and second guessed it. It's fine because of something else. Maybe that Uranus trigger is an event that makes me say, I have to reconsider some of what's really going on because something's not really matching up. And another on internal level, I watch for over analyzing like your emotional motivations as well, like pattern seeking. I just think we could get really that the Mercury, Mars, you can just get really overzealous about things and just kind of yeah, and go over it. So that's pretty much what I've got for this sequence. I think it's super interesting, and I look forward to continuing Mercury's little journey back direct over that in the Grand Water Trine and stuff. So that's what I got for us.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, that was really nice. I look at the fact that this Mercury-Mars conjunction is ruled by Jupiter, who is stationing to turn retrograde, and it makes me wonder about a re-examination of our beliefs. And going back to the idea that the Grand Water Trine could be speaking to the body's wisdom or some more embodied emotional form of intelligence, and how that might be prompting some kind of refining or reorienting of our beliefs in maybe some ways that are really dramatic or pointed or happening under pressure. But I like the advice not to be reactive and zealous. I think that's really spot on. The wisdom of Jupiter in Cancer can maybe, I think sometimes, for example, when people in our yoga studio would recognize through the value of a yoga class that maybe their diet needed to change, they might get really zealous and become too restrictive initially, even though the guiding light was pointing them in the right direction. And then when they would cut out too much, they might swing in the opposite direction and binge, coming off from an overly restrictive diet. So we don't want to set ourselves up for failure when we have the right wisdom. The compass is pointing us in the right direction, but some zealousness could create a problem for us right out the gate where we just go too extreme, even if we have the right idea. So that to me really resonated with what you were saying there.
Yeah, and I definitely see that with Mercury, like as I'm just watching him go forward and then he's going to go back, like reassess that and then come back and say like, yeah, there's some we got to double down on.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'm going to, now that I have this handy thing where I can shift people around and I'm cutting my own face off at the bottom, my turn. Well, we get into the middle of the month and it's just real soupy. Shirzad is going to take us through the Grand Water Trine. I just want to kind of broadly outline what's happening. I've put the 17th as the starting point of the Grand Water Trine because that's about the time, and this is maybe the most perfect of the Grand Water Trine moments that we're seeing, with three planets actually at the same degree, not the same minute, but pretty close, with the sun hitting Saturn and Jupiter and Saturn being trine to one another. So this is a really powerful moment. And if we move through this space, the next couple of days are really interesting. We see Mercury coming back in its retrograde into the Grand Water Trine, a very powerful new moon in Scorpio that will also be opposite Uranus. Mercury will be Cazimi in opposite Uranus. So, and then the sun goes through the opposition with Uranus after the new moon. So a very powerful moment within the Grand Water Trine taking place here. And I think, let me just make sure that I've mentioned all of the Mercury is Cazimi at the time of the new moon, in Scorpio opposite Uranus. So again, just it's a very soupy moment, and then a very powerful new moon with strong Uranian influence all over again. So with that soupy mess, Shirzad, you tell us, tell us what you think.
Wonderful. Yeah. So when I was thinking about this Grand Water Trine and the transits that I was going to talk about, my Mercury in Aquarius is ruled by Saturn in Pisces. I just felt like all these streams of water were coming to my brain and I couldn't see. I was looking at all this water and I'm like, I can't see. There's so much water. I have to verbalize all this water energy. And it was a little bit difficult for me, but finally I could verbalize it. So this mid to late November, the transits, is just so emotionally charged. It's deeply transformative. All this water energy. I kind of see this, to be honest, as like a soul detox, like a spa day for your soul and its evolution, where emotion, mind, and spirit just cleanse and reset together. It's maybe about feeling what you have avoided, releasing what is expired, and awakening to what's true, and beginning again with trust and fresh energy. So I would like to talk about water for a second here. In the languages of element, we think of water as depth, emotion, intuition, imagination. Water seeks stillness, reflection. It is fluid. It is gentle. It can be soothing, but at the same time, it can destroy. It can heal. It can reshape. Water is the element of dreams and inner healing. It can flow through the unseen parts of our minds. It is fertile. It gives life. And it kind of feels like every seed and every creature starts and begins with water. It kind of, water reminds me of life, reminds me of rebirth. And thinking about these three water signs that are involved here, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, as we know, Cancer, if you think of Cancer as the birth, or the point that your soul enters into your physical body. And at the same time, you have to remember in this physical body that you're part of the source and keep the roots. And then we think of Scorpio, the darkness takes over in Scorpio, darkness becomes dominant, and you get to experience those profound feelings, like desire, rebirth, intensity. And then we get to Pisces. That's, when the identity, the self kind of dissolves and becomes one with the divine. In Persian mysticism, we believe that the highest level of spirituality is that moment that you become one with the divine, and that's when you become empty. By empty, I mean you let go of your identity, your ego, whatever label that the society has given you. When you let go all of that, you become one with the divine. So I see all this sacred cycle of life here in this Grand Water Trine. The energies, all these energies of Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces may rise within us. They may nurture beginnings, stirring up some deep transformation, but inviting moments of letting go and compassion and spiritual insight. And as we know, trines are harmonious alignments, and trine is of the nature of Jupiter. It's supportive. It's expansive, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be easy for us to have all this water energy. So it is a good time to tune into our imagination and intuition and to flow with awareness instead of control, because every calm water can carve valleys through stone, but in time. And also we may think of Saturn in Pisces bringing some resistance or restructure. But we know that water always persists. It slows down, it detours, but ultimately it gets where it needs to go. This is a sacred moment for inner retreat, contemplation, surrender, and remembering that water is sometimes patient. It takes time, but by guidance of inner wisdom, it gets where it needs to go. So during this time, just, you might feel a lot of feelings from the past that you have not processed, unspoken words. Maybe some grief from the past might come up, and just make sure to let go of the tears. If you need to cry, just cry. I love a good cry myself. All the frustrations, what hidden in the subconscious. If it needs to come up, let it come up. It might be heavy, but when it comes out, you just feel like a little bit lighter. Your soul feels lighter, if that makes sense. And also maybe emotional overwhelm, anxiety, or feeling unsettled. That push and pull, but at the same time, just watch for creative ideas and imaginations and insights that come to you, those fertile, intuitive insights. Make sure you write them down. Even maybe you have these visions or intuitions that come that maybe you need to meditate on them. Maybe you need to journal or have rituals and track those patterns like pieces of a puzzle. And maybe these are seeds for healing, guidance, and growth. And also, most importantly, surrender to the process, because water flows and trust the flow. And just know that what you nurture now will flourish in time. And all this water energy, again, takes me back to that concept in Persian mysticism that I mentioned, which is the last step of it, that you become one with God. I wanted to end this section with a poem from Maulana that is known as Rumi in the West. I'm going to read a few of it in Persian, but I'll tell you how it relates to this Grand Water Trine. The Persian poem is: بمیرید بمیرید در این عشق، بمیرید در این عشق، چو مردید همه روح پذیرید. بمیرید و از این مرگ مترسید، که از این خاک برآیید سماوات بگیرید، که این نفس چو بند است و شما همچو اسیرید. What technically he's saying here, Rumi, is that in order to become one with the divine and get to that spirituality that you desire, you have to let go of the chains that your feet is stuck with. You have to let go of all these things that you have not processed, that you have not, all the chains that is, maybe your ego is the chain, maybe you're the captive of that chain, but when you let go of all of that, that's when you become a radiant full moon. That's how he expresses it here, that this Grand Water Trine is a sacred moment to immerse yourself and heal and be open to that infinite wisdom, because there's a lot of intuition happening with this Grand Water Trine. And the next one, I would like to talk about the Mercury retrograde opposite Uranus. Tim walked us through Mercury retrograde. So I just want to mention some things to watch for with this opposition. Just be mindful of miscommunications or surprising events. Maybe be careful of hasty decisions or speaking before thinking, and be mindful of that urge for independent thinking, non-conformity, which may clash with collaboration, and also restlessness or mental agitation. It's good to use this time for re-evaluation and reflection rather than launching new initiatives, or also approaching the surprises and disruptions with curiosity rather than impulsive reaction. And then we will have the Mercury retrograde trining Neptune. So this is because Mercury is retrograde here, to me, this energy feels very inward and reflective. Maybe it's a good time to reconnect with your inner wisdom and revisit your spiritual practices. And sometimes with this Neptune energy, maybe it's good to think that sometimes feeling should be the fact and not necessarily what our brain says, because what you feel in your heart, and in my culture, we believe that what your heart says, that is the voice of your soul, not your brain. That is the human side of you. So sometimes maybe it's good to listen to your heart rather than the factual thing that your brain is trying to just convince you to do. And as well as maybe an adaptive tide of insight, the guidance that might come to you through inspirations during this time. That's what comes to my mind with this. And then we have New Moon Scorpio. As we know, Moon is in its fall in Scorpio. And believe it or not, in my first language, in Persian, we have a lot of expressions about Moon in Scorpio that I didn't know before I became an astrologer. It's called Qamar dar Aqrab, and in Persian language, we want to refer to something that is messy and it's just like not a good situation. We say this is a Moon in a Scorpio situation. It's like we use it on a daily basis. And when I became an astrologer, I was like, wow, like good job, ancients. How did you know all of this back then with no tools or softwares or anything? But anyways, so this new moon is going to be opposite Uranus. So maybe sudden, realizations. It's very Uranus-y. Things from your inner world, because again, it's water energies, it's Scorpio. Things from your inner world might come to the surface, unexpected insights. And also this new moon here might be a little bit uncomfortable. There might be a little bit of emotional intensity, but there's purification that comes through that. There's always that soul evolution at the end. That's how I like to look at it, uncovering what's hidden, but it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, it's good for you on the soul level. And at every new moon, we need to remember that it kind of feels like moon, becomes dark into and dies into the sun's light, but it comes back, more purified. And it's a good time for maybe psychological purification. That's how I like to look at it. So it's a good time for turning inward, as well as psychological reflections, maybe, and planting intentions, maybe thinking of what seeds need to be planted now, and also just hold space for yourself if there is moments of release that needs to happen during this new moon. that can be also a great time for this. And also, we have the Mercury Cazimi happening during all of this water new moon energy. You know, when Cazimi happens, it's like it just feels like Mercury becomes way more stronger. It feels like the significance of Mercury and all its significations become amplified. The qualities, you know, Mercury becomes stronger and it has more clarity and influence. Maybe you can think of it as a moment that there is mental reorientation, that thoughts, memories, and messages from the depth of Scorpio, you know, that demand processing, maybe seeds of new expressions. It might be a good time for beginnings, planting those seeds, maybe for Mercury, you know, stuff, writing, speech, intellectual pursuits. And also, we have the sun in Scorpio that is opposite Uranus on November 21st. Maybe you feel the desire to break free from what confines you, like clashing with your need for stability and control. You might feel restless or impatient, but you might also have this sudden moments, aha moments about yourself, about your desire, about your path. Just maybe it's a good time to listen to them. And also, like, maybe there's invitations to adapt, to innovate, and to awaken. During this transit, make sure that you balance that stability with those sudden, you know, things that come to you. Allow yourself to stretch and experiment, but also honor your foundations. Things, since the most creative breakthroughs might come from moments that we integrate both, you know, our honoring our foundation, but also listening to the new ways and the breakthroughs that we need. So that's all I have for all this water energy.
That was wonderful. Thank you. And I really loved the poetry. That was beautiful. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that you know, there was a long period of time where the Arabian and then Persian carrying and transmission of astrology occurred. And so it makes sense to me that there would be this whole cultural inheritance of, you know, just common ways of talking about the moon. Or I loved when I was in India how I mean, doctors, you know, people that in our world might be more empirically minded and kind of like almost anti-astrology in India, there was no duality between the sciences and astrology or Ayurveda. And I love cultures that carry astrology, that have carried it, seem to have some openness still to that way of looking at the cosmos. So anyway, I love that. Let's move on to the next and last section. One thing I will say to everybody, that section that Shirazad just covered, we are covering in horoscopes this month. So you'll get those horoscopes coming through tomorrow. And I just want to emphasize how much I think you're going to enjoy the focusing that we did on your horoscopes within that new moon, Mercury Cazimi opposition to Uranus, that whole piece right there, we really hone in on for you guys. So on that note, we're going to hand over to Courtney for our last part of the month. Courtney gets the top seat. I could shift you guys around. This is fun. All right. So the last piece of the month is really sort of a reiteration and a chance for a different voicing of some of the same dynamics. We're going to see Mercury and Venus get together in Mercury's retrograde, and the two of them really begin a process of one final reactivation of the Grand Water Trine that starts coming through around this time. We're going to see, I kind of put it as November 24th that the Grand Water Trine starts reactivating through Mercury's retrograde coming into the conjunction with Venus. The 24th through the 29th of the month, you really start seeing Venus activating the Grand Water Trine. Mercury then stations and turns direct by the end of the month. At the very end of the month, Venus will also reactivate the opposition to Uranus that the new moon was a part of, and that so many other planets took part in this month of November. So many oppositions to Uranus. We see one final opposition at the end of the month between Venus and Uranus on the 29th. So Courtney's going to take us through a sort of a reiteration of some similar themes, but with slightly different cast of characters and one slightly different Uranian opposition. I'm just going to highlight all of it, and we're just going to call this about the 24th through the 29th.
Yeah, it's just more water, guys.
Yeah, for real.
But it's really interesting to think about with these series of grand water trines, they're kind of like waves. And if you think about the way that water transforms the land, it happens in layers. So I've been enjoying looking at these faster moving planets in the later degrees of Scorpio as sort of like lending a signature to the ways in which this like greater transformation that's really like anchored down by that continual trine between Saturn and Jupiter is coming and like transforming as we go through each iteration. Thinking initially about this conjunction that's taking place between Venus and Mercury, it's always really interesting when Venus and Mercury get together because they're two of the craftiest planets that we work with in astrology. If we think about Mercury as Hermes, he was like the mythological gift giver of the written word to the ancient Egyptians. And there's this really overt association between the written word and like the casting of spells. We have this word grammar, and etymologically it's linked to the word grimoire, which is the name for a book of magic. And Venus has some similar things going on as well with her signification of cosmetics and ornamentation and art. You can think about the word glamour, which also is connected to grammar etymologically, but it's about the way in which we can alter the appearance of something and bewitch or enchant or like change our perception. So both of these planets have a way in which they can subtly interact with the environment, the structures of reality in order to affect change in this really refined way. So when you drop that conjunction into the sign of Scorpio, which is the place where Mars expresses under the cover of night and muted by water, you're going to see things like the artful veiling of hidden motives and desires, a refined presentation of like the raw edges of our emotional realities, or like clever and creative ways of relating with the depths of experience. And I think this interaction here is really flavoring this final iteration of the Grand Water Trine here in the month of November. This is the third time where we've passed through this sort of like big upwelling of water. And by now, perhaps we're getting comfortable with some of the changes that are being marked by this Grand Water Trine. After the sun came through and like illuminated those changes, maybe now we have a greater sense of how to respond to what we're being presented with in this like clever way that Mercury and Venus are assisting us with. The word that comes to mind is familiarization. And my daughter was just mentioning this last night. She was saying about how when there's a food she doesn't like, but she eats it anyways because she knows it's good for her, she starts to like it. And there's something about the more time you spend in a certain situation, the better you are able to integrate with it. And pulling back to the water here, like water is the only element that can permeate into another body without breaking down its boundaries. Like think about osmosis, right? Or when you sit in a bathtub for too long and your skin starts to get wrinkly because you're soaking up all of this water. There's this process of integration. And going back to that word familiar, it's etymologically linked to the word family. So there's something about becoming familiar with something, you're integrating into it, it's becoming part of yourself. That, and like the porousness that Tim brought up, talking about the Grand Water Trines too. It's like there's this porous interaction between ourselves and the environments that we're in, these watery places of emotional realities, maybe our cultural or social realities, that's informing this exchange. And when you're integrated with an environment on that deep of a level, it's so much easier to operate from a place of instinct and nuance. So that's the way I'm weaving in this conjunction between Mercury and Venus and how it's informing this Grand Water Trine. And Venus, I think, is going to be carrying this through too, as she moves into her opposition with Uranus. I love too what Shahrazad said about the letting go of our chains in order to merge. Seeing that both Venus and Uranus are in fixed signs here, but there's like a volatility with Uranus that's being mirrored by the volatility that you can sometimes find in Scorpio. But there's also this greater thread of weaving things together. Like we have this kite formation again that's taking place, but in a totally different part of the sky, emphasizing this watery element. And with Venus as the host of Uranus, sort of informing the way that Uranus is operating, perhaps there's something to that letting go of the chains in order to connect more deeply into the environments and the situations that we find ourselves working through during this like huge watery period of the month of November.
Oops, sorry, I was muted. That was fantastic. I really appreciated the piece about grammar and grimoire, glamour and grammar, and the idea that Venus and Mercury have a little bit of a bewitching effect. I even think about poetry and music that has, traditionally, obviously, all across the planet, the spoken word, the written word, the sung word has the power to heal, has the power to, it can put people in a trance. It can take people out of their bodies. So fascinating to think about Mercury and Venus bringing about some shift through their insights and artfulness, their incantational magical art power. That is exciting. That really adds a kind of magical twist to the end of November that I wasn't really thinking about it from that angle until I heard you dig into the etymologies there. I really appreciate that. One thing I'll add as a final note here, we haven't mentioned a lot about Jupiter and Saturn's trine in particular, but this is a moment that if we are tracking the Jupiter-Saturn cycle, becomes really important. That's something that I'm going to be doing on the channel in the month of November. So there's a lot more content on that to come. So I won't say too much here because we'll be covering this at length this month, but Jupiter and Saturn had a conjunction, right? And their conjunction then carried over into a square, which we had last year or so, and now they're in a trine. And so the building of consensus in their trine is a really special part of the meaning of their trine. The building of consensus that maybe went through a point of testing or contraction last year and is now able to cooperate a little bit more than the clash they were expressing through their square. So that becomes really interesting because Jupiter and Saturn are reality builders. None of the realities that they build are permanent in this material world. But when it comes to our beliefs and how they shape our lives, when it comes to the structures of all the different facets or areas of our lives, their trine right now expresses, especially with reception too, Saturn's in Jupiter's sign. So their ability to work together in constructing something rooted in what we're feeling and the power of what our emotions are showing us, that level of osmosis becomes really important. I find it really interesting that I'm just thinking of my wife, who's a Cancer rising, who's been really like compelled to do all of this ancestral research. She looked into some of her DNA, the origins of, her ancestors, and has been looking at some of the charting of her family tree. And it's like strikes me as so watery to be looking into our past, our ancestry, and what we're familiar with, to use that word. And then what do we build from that? How does that reflecting that water provides us with create something new to build upon? So anyway, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but I really appreciate all of you and what you brought to this month's conversation. This was fantastic. And I hope all of you out there were able to get a lot from this conversation today as well. I want to tell you how you can stay in touch with all of our hosts before we leave. So let me do that now. Let me go to Dream the Wilderness for Courtney. Instagram is at Dream the Wilderness, where you can follow her content. And then if you want to follow her writing, which I highly recommend, and other things that she is up to, it's dreamthewilderness.substack.com. Do I have all of that right, Courtney?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, excellent. For Shirazad, we have at New Moon Inner Healing on Instagram. I've been really enjoying your content on Instagram.
Thank you.
So, yeah, you're killing it. I love it. So everyone check out Shirazad's work. And then newmooninnerhealing.com is the website. You can book a reading there. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
All right, fantastic. I want to go to at Cosmic Blueprint. Do I have that right?
That is it. Yep.
Okay, there. And you can find linktree.com/Timothy Paulden for website information. Booking stuff is there as well, right?
Yep, that's everything. Also, my Blue Sky is there. I am more active on Blue Sky than anything.
Okay, yeah, definitely. At Cosmic Blueprint, you can find the links to that stuff on your bio, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So check out Timothy's good work there. And then at Bianca Celine Astrology for Bianca.
Me.
Do I have that right? Does that look
Yes.
spelled? Okay, good. Make sure I spell it all right. Yeah, so you can follow, again, I've been loving all of your content that you guys have been putting out. BiancaCeline.com is the website. Do I have that? Does that look right?
Yes. That looks great. Perfect.
Okay. Perfect. So, you can book readings, follow all of the work that these folks are doing. I was saying earlier, you're going to see after we sign off right now, there's an informational video about the year 1 program. Remember, early bird rate ends 31st. So you have just like another day or two. Of course, the class starts on November 15th. So there's still time to register, and you can use the need-based tuition option all the way up until the start of the class if you need a little extra help or if exchange rates are high. Please do take advantage of that. If you have a sincere desire to study, that's all that really matters to us. And if that means you need to use the need-based tuition to not hurt yourself or your budget, please take advantage of that. One of the things we really care about at Nightlight is empowering the people who come through our programs, who are talented, who show promise. We provide a lot of opportunities for people to take next steps. In addition to preparing you to take next steps through our curriculum, we try to provide meaningful opportunities to give back, so that our school is not just about me and my work, but about the entire community. So if that's the kind of place that speaks to you, come study with us. We'd love to have you. We will sign off for now. Have a great month. We will see you all again for the Astrology of December. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.
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 Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm excited to tell you about our upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. This is our first year course in Hellenistic astrology, and it begins again this November. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the course, the format of the course, and how to register. So let's go ahead and get into it. What is this course about? Well, if you are not familiar, ancient Hellenistic astrology is the earliest and original form of horoscopic astrology. All of the subsequent forms and schools of astrology that have existed over thousands of years come from these philosophical and theoretical roots. And so what you're doing when you study Hellenistic astrology is you're going back to understand the why behind absolutely everything. Why were there ever such a thing as houses and signs in the first place? How were the planets ever assigned to rule various portions of the zodiac in the first place? How do you use the categories of essential dignity, and why were they ever created in the first place? If you're someone like me, you like to know the why behind things, because once you understand the why, then you know how to use things more intuitively. So really the point of Hellenistic astrology, in my opinion, is not so much about going back and becoming a traditional astrologer or just being traditional for the sake of being traditional, as much as it is about grasping the roots of the entire system and paradigm. When you understand those roots, you have more intuition and understanding, which allow for you to be much more artful and fluid in the way that you speak the language of astrology. We call this class Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic because while it is about going back to understand the philosophical, theoretical, technical roots of the tradition, it's also about fluidly bridging those things with modern astrology and all of its most unique contributions. For example, modern astrology has given us so much psychological depth and personal depth. And so in a modern astrological setting, you're going to get the ability to explore your own character, your own psychology, and you're going to be able to utilize astrology for a process of healing and personal transformation. But when you pair that with ancient astrology, and it's almost like predictive karmic analytics, you really have a full toolkit to work with. And so that's also a great mission of ours at Nightlight, is to bridge ancient and modern forms, which is why we call the program Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. So that's just a little kind of overview of the program. If you want to know more about the specifics of the curriculum and of the syllabus, what I encourage you to do is go over to nightlightastrology.com, click on the courses page, go to the first year course, scroll down, and you'll see this over 12 months you'll learn about. And here you're going to see more of a detailed breakdown of the curriculum itself. I can promise you that if you've studied astrology in modern context, but you've never gone back to the ancient roots, while some of these topics may look familiar to you and you go, oh, I've already learned about that, unless you've studied them from the Hellenistic perspective, I guarantee that you are not going to be familiar with this content. Hellenistic astrology is mind-blowingly new and interesting for most people. And if you've never studied it, again, don't assume that anything on this list is something you're going to be familiar with. In that way, the program is really ideal for a variety of different people, and I'll say more about that in a second. So what is the format of the course? Let's go to that next. Scroll down and you're going to see that the course includes 30 online webinars that I lead throughout the year. Over the course of a year together, I have 30 classes that are broken into different units of material. In between those classes, we have breakout study sessions with your course director and 2 TAs. They're going to lead you through Q&A sessions and tutoring sessions to make sure that you have a lot of support in between major units of study. In addition, we also have an interactive group forum discussion where you can ask questions year round and get an answer within a business day in the student forum, where a lot of people also connect and build community. Lots of people in that forum also develop like little meetup groups outside of class. That's very common in all of our programs. It's a very community loving, warm space where anyone's also welcome. Throughout the course, you're also going to find that for every lesson, if you're just there as a hobby student, you can just listen to the webinars. They're all recorded for you. So if you can't make the live webinars, everything is housed on the website as recordings. I'd say about 40 or 50% of our students are going to be following along at their own pace, whereas the other half might be attending the live webinars. But it's really kind of, you know, if you can attend a few and then 1 week you got to be gone, the recordings are always there. You have lifetime access to everything in the course, so it's not a big deal. For every lesson as well, if you're someone who wants to go really, really deep, maybe you have the intention to practice professionally, this course is set up with an optional certification exam at the end from our school, from our program. So you can, you know, if you want to build that resume and develop the credentials from our programs, you can do that, but it's optional, so you don't have to. And outside of every lesson, we have recommended reading. We have supplemental bonus content, all of which is optional, but it's there for people who might want a lot more, whereas some people will take the webinars themselves, and that'll be plenty. So it's really flexible in that way. Also, this is one program within 4 years of curriculum that are meant to go together. And so most people who come through our first year program will end up taking our second year program, where we develop forecasting and prediction and transit tracking techniques. Our third year program, which is aimed at counseling and psychology. So psychological counseling skills is our third year program. And then the Oracle Within, which is our exploration of the philosophical, spiritual roots of the divinatory oracular tradition of astrology. So there's a lot of material there. We also have another 1 year program in horary astrology for some people who want to add that predictive tool to their toolkit. So there's just a lot of material at Nightlight that this class is actually just one part of, which can be taken standalone, or for some people, they get into it, they're going to love it. You're going to hang out with us for 3 or 4 years worth of content. This program is ideal for a number of different types of students of astrology. I'll say that for starters. So let's see here. I'll stop sharing this. So we have there's a profile of the typical students who come through our courses. One is going to be people who just want a very guided introduction to ancient astrology because you've never had it before. Maybe you're only familiar with modern, and you want that guided, structured approach to learning traditional for the first time. Also, people who are brand new to astrology in general, there's no better place to start than at the roots of the ancient foundations. So whether you're a total beginner or just a beginner to Hellenistic, this is a great place to start. If you are someone who's been around astrology for a long time, but you've never had a guided, structured approach to Hellenistic astrology, again, this is a great place to start. I promise you, Hellenistic is very different than what you're familiar with, and you're going to need a guided and structured approach at some point in time. I also think for people who are looking for a lineage, which means not just a bunch of information, but a practitioner-specific based approach where you get to see a practitioner work with clients. You get to hear how a practitioner has prioritized different techniques and why. You're going to get a structured, spiritually grounded focus at Nightlight as well, where if you're looking for someone who practices astrology but also values grounded everyday spiritual practice, that's Nightlight. If you want a community that's been in the industry for a long time now, this is our 16th year of teaching programs and guiding students through trainings. So all of those things, if they matter to you, this is a great place to study. It's a warm community atmosphere. It's spiritually grounded. It's focused. It's academically rigorous. It's going to provide you the appropriate preparation for practicing professionally, especially if you go through all of our programs. But also for those who are just curious and love astrology for your own personal interest, this is going to be a great place for you to learn and grow and thrive and feel like you have a lot of support around you in the curriculum, the teachers, the community, as you're developing, what might just be a personal interest or spiritual hobby. So that is who it's ideal for. Finally, how you register. You go over to the website. I'm going to take you back there. And it's at the bottom of the first year page. You're going to find that the early bird rate is in effect until October 24th. You can save significantly off the cost of the course when you use the early bird rate, where you can pay in full or use an early bird installment rate plan. Both are going to save you off the significantly off the cost of the course. But also at Nightlight, it has always been our mission to make sure that astrological education is accessible for everyone. So please, if you are someone who would love to take this course, but maybe you could only afford a small amount of tuition per month, use the tuition assistance. It is there. All you got to do is plot, you fill out the little form, you tell us your situation. If you're on a fixed income, if you're on a limited income, if you're part-time, if you're in between jobs, if you don't make a lot and you're on that fixed budget, we understand. We don't want people to hurt themselves trying to study something that is spiritual that we feel should be very accessible for everybody. So if you're someone who could use a little help to make this program happen, for whatever reason, maybe you're a single parent or you're on disability or you're retired or you're on a fixed income, whatever the case is, use that tuition assistance. Also, people in other countries who have extreme exchange rates. We get it. So just use the tuition assistance and we'll be glad to make sure that the price point is accessible. For us, as a spiritual topic, we're a business at the end of the day, but we believe that this is a spiritual topic. And so accessibility has been a part of our model for 16 years now. We've never not had one of our training programs with affordable sliding scale based prices for people who need it. So please take advantage of that. It's all there for you. I hope to see you in classes soon. And if you have any questions about the program whatsoever, direct them to us at info@nightlightastrology.com. And I hope to see you all coming up here in November. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.